afternoon. Okay, so the first part of this slide is on phase equilibria. And phase equilibria is the basis for all mass transfer operation. And it's actually having to do with the phases that are present during the mass transfer and the equilibrium between the phases. So mass transfer ceases when an equilibrium between the two phases is reached. So the two phases wherein transfer of a component is to occur. So the transfer will cease when equilibrium is already reached. Now, the rate of mass transfer is directly proportional to the driving force, which is a departure from equilibrium condition. Now, this is to be able to evaluate the rate of mass transfer. The driving force has to be accurately determined, which in turn rely on the equilibria between the phases. In the case of gas absorption, of course, the mass transfer is driven by a concentration gradient, the change in concentration. In nearly all situations in phase equilibrium, two phases are involved except when we talk about solid phases. Now, the controlling variables are the intensive properties, temperature, pressure, and concentration. And in gas absorption, as one of the many mass transfer processes that we will discuss, equilibrium data or the equilibrium data can be shown either in the form of tables, equations, and graphs. So for most operations, however, the pertinent equilibrium relationships are shown graphically. So either the relationship is shown via tables or equations and even graphs. Now, let's go to the basis of phase equilibrium. So, of course, the basis for phase equilibrium starts with the phase rule. And in here, we have the equation F being equal to C minus P plus the constant 2. So, F here is the number of the degrees of freedom, otherwise known as the variance. C is representing the number of components present in our original mixture, and P, the number of phases that are contacted. So C, number of components in the mixture, and P, the number of phases. Now, the F, or the degrees of freedom, known as the variance, is the number of independent intensive variables, temperature, or could be pressure, and even concentration, that can be fixed to define the equilibrium state of the system. These are the number of intensive variables that needs to be defined. That way, a system can reach what we call equilibrium state. Otherwise, if it's not the number, or if the number that we were able to get from the equation previously shown is not the same number of intensive variables given in the problem, then the particular problem is said to be not having a specific solution, because the problem in itself will not reach, or the system in itself will not reach an equilibrium state. What will happen if the F is fewer than the variables that were computed? What does it mean? So if you have computed the F and the problem gave you a fewer values of intensive variables that could be used, then a number of states fits the assumption. While if F is too many, we say the system is over-specified. Now, this is a case similar to algebra, wherein if your number of equations is less than your number of unknowns, there's no point in having to evaluate the set of your equation, because your variables cannot be solved, or your system of equations will not have a solution. That is, if the number of your equations does not equal the number of unknowns, or if it's lesser. If you have a case wherein the number of your equations is more than the number of the unknowns, you have an over-specified system of equation. And what does that imply or mean? That your solution can be one of many solutions. So you only have you don't only have one specific set of solution for your set of variables, but you can have more than one because your system is said to be over-specified. So it's the same thing here with determination of the degrees of freedom or variance. If for a particular problem and system, the degree of freedom or variance was already determined and you have in a problem lesser than the one that you have computed, meaning lesser number of variables that were specified, then the problem will have no solution. If you have more than the number of intensive variables specified than the one that you require to solve the problem, then several solution fits your given system or your given problem, or several solutions can be decided for your given problem. So the purpose of the degrees of freedom here is likewise similar to or can be likened to that in algebra, as I have said. So your number of intensive variables that needs to be specified must be equal to the F computed in your specific problem or for your specific problem, so that your particular problem will have a solution. Now, for a two-phase system, for example, variance is equal to 2, which is always equal to the number of components present in our most of the problems that you will be encountering here. If, for example, pressure is fixed, the liquid phase concentration can be changed independently. Meaning, if the problem specifies the operating pressure, then the problem can change the liquid phase concentration in any way that the author wants it to change. Then your problem will have a solution. So it says here, then the gas phase composition and temperature can be determined. As long as you have two intensive variables that were given or fixed in the problem, you can solve a given problem which has two phases that were contacted with two components present in each of the phases. So that would then be a problem that will have a solution. Otherwise, you will not have a solution for a particular problem. So that's the purpose of the degrees of freedom or variance. Now, the second thing that will establish that will be our basis for equilibrium or that will establish equilibrium is Rayleigh's law. Now, according to this law, the partial pressure of a component gas is equal to the product of its pure vapor pressure times its mole fraction in the liquid phase. So A here is a component gas. So its partial pressure will be equal to the product of its pure vapor pressure, which can be taken from property diagrams or tables, and XA is the mole fraction of A in the liquid phase. However, though we can use Rayleigh's law in determining equilibrium or can be a basis for equilibrium, this is only limited for ideal solution. So the law holds only for ideal solution, or shall we say solutions in which the components are having more or less similarities in behavior, physically and chemically. So physical and chemical behavior of the components of the system should be more or less the same for such a system to be considered as an ideal system. If the problem does not specify that your system is ideal, you are not allowed to assume that your system is ideal because you have an alternate equation that you can use if Rayleigh's law is not applicable. So most common ideal systems mentioned in the textbooks that we are using, for example, John Kuplis and McCabe, is benzene-toluene. It's an ideal system. But there are other systems that are also ideal. But the thing is, the problem has to specify it. If not, you have another equation to use, as I have said, and you will be safer with that particular equation. Now, that equation is Henry's law. So an alternative equation that can establish equilibrium between phases in your system. Now, in here, the partial pressure still of a component gas A is equal to the product of a constant we call the Henry's constant and its mole fraction in the liquid phase. So we have change the pure vapor pressure of A in the original equation by Reynolds law to Henry's constant. Now, where do we get this Henry's constant? Henry's constant is present in appendices of unit operations book and also present in the chapter in your chemical engineer's handbook by Paris for gas absorption, gas liquid system. So you have a table there that shows to you the value of Henry's constant for various systems. So the system has to be given for Henry's constant to be known. If not, most of the problems, so as to eliminate the, let's say, the hassle of having to look into specific tables for its value, it is given. But if not, you always have your handbook and you have the appendices in your book. Now, from Henry's law, we can derive a particular equation that this time relates the mole fraction in the gas phase of a component gas A to its mole fraction in the liquid phase of the same component A. But this time, what happened is your original Henry's law equation was divided by the total pressure of the system. So you divide the left side by P total, and the same also with the right side of the equation. So as the identity or your equation is still intact. Now, PA over P will give you a YA, and your Henry's constant in the original equation when divided by the total pressure will be H prime. It's already stated here. So it's H prime, and still XA is XA. Most of the time, we're using this. Or problems from Jan Kuplis uses the expression wherein you already given the equilibrium equation. We call this the equilibrium equation that tells you the relationship between the mole fraction of A in the liquid phase in relation to its mole fraction in the gas phase. It's already in this equation, like Y equal to mx form of equation. If this is not given in the problem and there's a way for you to find the H from a particular table for your system that is given, then do so. All you have to do is divide then the original equation by the total pressure. And it will give you this particular equation of YA in terms of XA. So that's Henry's law. If Reynolds law is not applicable, then use Henry's law. Then we have another equation that gives us the equilibrium relationship between X and Y again. Same thing between X and Y. It's called the X factor distribution coefficient, or simply the, I said X factor, the K factor rather. The K factor distribution coefficient or the distribution coefficient. Simply the distribution coefficient. Now, this is the ratio of the mole fraction in the vapor and liquid phases at equilibrium. The reason why you see the subscript E here is it's denoting that this mole fraction ratio should be measured at equilibrium for component I, that is. The I there, the first letter that appears in the subscript refers to a component in your system. So the ratio of the mole fractions at equilibrium for your vapor and liquid phases. Now, if Reynolds law and Dalton's law hold for your particular system, we can also represent our distribution coefficient by P sub I prime over P. This P sub I prime over P, or rather this P sub I prime is the pure vapor pressure of component I. Again, pure vapor pressure of component I divided by the total pressure of your system. However, it has to be, your system has to be ideal, or it's, or Reynolds law is applicable for such a system. Otherwise, this one is safer, and most of the time, this equation is often used. Now, if Reynolds law holds, then the ratio of the distribution coefficient or the K factor and the relative volatility of the components are the same. So relative volatility will be first discussed here. Then later on, when you go to the second set of unit operations, that is next semester, you will also encounter again relative volatility in distillation. Now, relative volatility of component I with respect to J, so these are the components present in your binary mixture, is equal to, take note again, the ratio of their mole fractions in the gas phase to the liquid phase. So this is for I in the numerator, and here in the denominator you have component J. You can also get this still relative volatility, the alpha, is also likened to the ratio of the K factor in terms of component I over K factor in terms of component J. So the ratio of the two K factors. Or it could be the pure vapor pressures of components I and J. Again, this one is when Raoult's law holds. Now, K factors, however, you have to note, are strongly dependent on temperature. So when temperature changes, this one changes, the K factor. But the relative values of K for two-component system change only moderately. It is a given that K is not a constant because it's dependent on temperature. However, if our system is only made up of two components, the variation in the value of K as temperature varies is very moderate. So it's just okay if we will assume that on a wide range of temperature, your K would more or less be not varying too much. So we have three already as to the basis of equilibrium for our system. It could be the degrees of freedom, that's number one. Number two, that would be Raoult's law, applicable for ideal system. Number three, that would be Henry's law, no limitation for this law. And the fourth is this one, the K factor or the distribution coefficient. By the way, class, the distribution coefficient you will encounter in liquid-liquid extraction, whereas relative volatility could be encountered here now and in distillation also. Now, in terms of diagrams, your equilibrium relationship for a system could be taking the form of any of these diagrams depending on the system that is given or depending on what the problem provides. And for example, I have taken this from Jean Couplets for a gas-liquid equilibrium data for a system that contains sulfur dioxide. And if you have the mole fraction of sulfur dioxide in the liquid phase plotted against its partial pressure in the gas phase, you have a curve, and that curve is this, the bold line that you are seeing. That's the curved relationship between the partial pressure of SO2 in the gas phase to its mole fraction in the liquid phase. Actually, that's Raoult's law, relating P sub A to X sub A. However, if our system is not ideal and the problem is silent whether it's ideal or not, then it's safe not to assume that it is ideal. We can approximate its curved behavior here into this linear behavior. The thing that approximates it, the original is Raoult's law, if it's ideal, but the thing that approximates it is Henry's law. So what Henry's law does is it linearizes this curved relationship between XA and P sub A into something that is linear. You see the variation is just very small, so it's okay. So this is for the system SO2 water. Let's say for example, your solvent is water and your SO2 is contained in a gas mixture with air. So you are to take out sulfur dioxide from air using pure water as the solvent. So the equilibrium curve that you will have to use is this one. And if you're not provided with this, but the problem gives you Henry's law, and that particular Henry's law gives you that the constant is 29.6 in this case, because here the 29.6 replaces the H in the equation that I have shown to you in the previous slide, then you can use this particular equation. You need not look for a specific equilibrium diagram for you to be able to find what would be the partial pressure of SO2 in the gas phase given its mole fraction in the liquid phase. Now, by linearizing, you already have this equation, and all you have to do is place in here XA, you'll be able to solve for P sub A. Now, reading from an equilibrium diagram will sometimes not lead to accurate results because it depends on how well you read. or how good is your vision. But if you have an equation, then all you have to do is substitute the appropriate value for the variable in your equation. So this is one. Another diagram that could be used is this boiling point diagram for benzene toluene. Now, I've mentioned benzene toluene is an ideal system. So then this particular diagram is an application or takes into consideration already Rayleigh law. Now, what do you have in this diagram? So in this diagram, you have this lower curve and this is the upper curve. So you have on the horizontal axis, the mole fraction of benzene in the liquid or in the vapor phase. So meaning the value here on the horizontal axis could either be X or Y. Why? Why is that? That here on the x-axis, you can either have X or Y. Because here on the vertical axis, you have now the temperature. So given the temperature for a saturated liquid mixture of benzene and toluene, you'll be able to determine the XA. For example, at a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, what is the mole fraction of benzene? Benzene is A in the liquid phase. So liquid, this is saturated liquid, the lower curve. The upper curve is saturated vapor. So using the temperature, let's say 100 degrees Celsius, you just get the 100 degrees Celsius here, project it towards the left, or rather towards the right, then read downwards. Whatever is the value reading here, that would be the mole fraction of benzene, the A, in the liquid phase. If you would be asked, what is the mole fraction of benzene in the gas phase? Then, of course, you have to use the upper curve. 100, given the temperature 100, you go to the next curve because this one is saturated vapor and read downwards your YA. So in here, given the temperature, you'll be able to give right away the composition of your liquid and your gas phases in terms of benzene. If you know already benzene, since it's if it's a two-component system, then all you have to do is subtract XA from 1, then you will know XB. B is toluene, A is benzene, because you only have a two-component mixture, as I've said. If you already have YA, if you read YA using the saturated vapor curve, like there, then you will have YB as 1 minus YA. It's just as simple as that. So you're given the temperature. Now, this particular diagram, we call this the boiling point diagram, equilibrium diagram for benzene and toluene, has an equivalent table, which I will show in a little while. So either this diagram or that table, whichever of the two is applicable for your system, then use whichever is available. Now, we also have here mole fraction of benzene, again for benzene toluene. So Rayleigh's law is applicable in this case. In the horizontal axis, you have benzene, mole fraction of benzene in the liquid phase, and on the vertical axis, you have mole fraction of benzene in the gas phase or in the vapor phase. Now, the relationship between these two, XA and YA, is curved. So you see this. So it's not linear as it is depicted in Rayleigh's law, the one that we have an equation which is linear, because equation of Rayleigh's law is linear. So actually, it's like this, it's curved. So if you're given a particular value of XA and you want to know the corresponding value of YA, all you have to do is go up and then read. That would be the corresponding YA for a value of XA. Now, what's the difference of this particular diagram from this? If you notice, class, this one is only good for 1 atm pressure. And this is also good for 1 atm pressure. So if the pressure is not anymore 1 atm, these two diagrams will not anymore be used or could not anymore be used. But it need not be a problem because majority of our problems are at normal atmospheric pressure and temperature. So XA here, you go up, then you read the corresponding YA. This is the 45-degree line, which is always drawn together with the curve if the solution of the problems, which I will be discussing to you probably next meeting, will be done graphically, but we don't want to focus on the graphical procedure because we want it analytically determined, whatever those things that we need to or we are required to determine in the problem. So these are just diagrams where you can get values, more importantly, of XA or YA or partial pressures, given the temperature and the condition in the problem, which is most of the time normal atmospheric pressure, okay, of 1 atm. The table that I'm referring to, equivalent to this one, I'd like to go back temporarily to this one, is this. So if you don't have that diagram, you can have this one. So for a particular temperature, this would be your corresponding XA and YA. For example, at a temperature of 100 degrees Celsius, the mole fraction of benzene in the liquid phase is 0.258. In the gas phase, it's 0.456. So you can see these are your XA and YA for a given temperature. You don't have a diagram anymore when you are to read it yourselves. Now, I do have a question though. What happens if the temperature that is given is not this temperatures here? For example, instead of giving a 90, what is given is, or a 95, what is given is 97.5. What will you do? The problem gives you for a benzene toluene system that the temperature is at 97.5. What will you do? Anyone? Given the table, you have this table, what will you do? Or you have your books with you, you have your handbook with you, and the temperature that is given in the problem is not the temperature that you see here in the second column or in the first column. If it's in Kelvin, what will you do? Class, what will you do?
Interpolate, Miss.
Interpolate. Anybody who has a suggestion, what will you do? Joshua, what will you do, Joshua? If the temperature is not found here, what will you do?
Ma-interpolate, Miss. Linear interpolation.
Oh, linear interpolation. Is Renzo around? Renzo? Renzo? Salido. What will you do, Renzo? Oh, Renzo is not around. Sarah, are you around, Sarah? I'm killing time because I will be cut anyhow, so we have to.
Hello, Miss.
What will you do if the temperature that is given is not on the column, second column or in the first column? Is that the exact temperature in the first column or in the second column? What will you do?
Nang same an idea, Miss, nga ma-interpolate.
Oh, interpolate. Sige, Jobern. What will you do, Jobern? If the temperature that is given in the problem is not the same as this in the table, or it could be any system as long as you have a table. It need not be benzene toluene. It could be a system that you are provided with a table and you have XA and YA in temperatures, and you don't have the temperature that is stated in the problem is not the exact temperature that you have. What will you do?
Interpolate man, Miss.
Oh, interpolate. Okay, so we're not able to get my discussion. You see this? It's curved. This is also curved. Are you allowed to interpolate if the relationship is curved like this one? XA in relation to YA. This is curved, right? Interpolation only works for linear relationship. It was taught to you. You are only allowed to interpolate when the relationship between the variables are linear. Since it's not linear, you have no choice. You have to plot. You have to plot this. For a particular temperature, you have to plot XA and YA. And then at a particular temperature approximated in your curve, because it will never be linear, you rate the corresponding XA or YA. You cannot interpolate. As you have as shown here, the relationship between XA and YA is not linear. It's curved. I said the 45-degree line was only drawn here just for if the process of determining the unknowns in the problem is graphical. But the relationship is this curve here. Okay, so remember that interpolation works if the relationship between variables is linear. Okay, now we move on. This is our first sample problem. I'll be cut in a minute. We will reconnect. So the partial pressure of CO2 in air is 1.333 times 10 raised to 4 Pascal. And the total pressure is 1.1333 times 10 raised to 5 Pascal. The gas phase is in equilibrium with the water solution at 303 Kelvin. What is the value of XA of CO2 in equilibrium in the solution? Now, for Henry's law constant for CO2, I have already placed it in here for your reference, but you have to check in your appendices in your book and in your Paris handbook for this constant, where you're going to get it. For CO2 at 303.2 Kelvin, this is Henry's law constant. The problem is silent whether your system is an ideal system, so you're not allowed to assume. So then you will use Henry's law. Now, this could be taken also from the appendix of John Couples. I have indicated here the page and the appendix. So we have P sub A, the partial pressure is equal to the Henry's law constant times the mole fraction in the liquid phase. The question as to what is the value of XA can be solved based on this particular formula, wherein you just substitute the constant of Henry's constant and you substitute here the partial pressure because it's given already.